Good morning. I'm Paul Taylor. I am the Managing Director of Trust Nature Party Limited here in Australia. We're looking at a model for soil regeneration. It's a form of what we might call radical permaculture because we use very aggressive ground covers to fast forward soil development. We use a variety of ground covers in association with plants, and we use specialist compost that's rich in a high diversity of beneficial plant and soil microbes. So we use plants, minerals, microbes, organic matter. And organic matter comes from the compost. Organic matter comes from the cover crops. And the association of the plants, the microbes, and the organic matter fast forward soil development. So what we're looking at is, as I said, a form of perhaps radical permaculture that uses elements of agroforestry, it uses elements of intercropping, it uses elements of permaculture food forests, and of course it uses some heritage, quite a few heritage agricultural techniques. Once again, this rampant ground cover crop is a legume. We planted lupin, vetch, and cowpea initially. The first cycle of cover crop was sunflowers. And then it was followed by cowpea, which became rampant. This is an example of how we're modeling hidden garden farm on Christmas Island to show how we can produce the biomass required to build fertility. And you can crop in this biomass. And one of the things that cover crops do as companion plants or as ground covers underneath productive crops is that it controls soil temperature. Because once we get too much heat in the soil, the production goes down. The plant is in stress. And this keeps plants out of stress. It needs to be managed. It's quite easily managed in a cropping system. And we're going to go into this food forest now and take a bit of a clip, and then we're going to come back into it after we do this cycle of chop and drop. Once again, this will be the fourth cycle of chop and drop over this year. A year ago, January of 2017, this was all pretty highly degraded lawn with a lot of sparse bare patches in between because it's mostly just bare clay. So come on in, if you can find your way in to the permaculture food forest, which has become a bit of a jungle. And we'll just show you around so we can show you what it's like after we do the chop and drop. Come on in. If you can make it. Okay, the first thing we see here is a fig tree that's also got cowpea growing on it. The interesting thing is that the fig thinks it's springtime. Fig tree thinks it's springtime, so it's putting out some new shoots and it's putting out a new crop of figs. So we'll see if we actually get to harvest those. So I only got about a dozen figs off of this year, but as you can see, there are figs coming on again. So we'll see how that develops. This is a pomegranate, and we believe this pomegranate will bear some fruit next year. It actually flowered this year, but we picked the flowers off because we want it to go into vegetative growth. If you look down here, we have comfrey. Comfrey is a terrific biomass and fertility booster, and it's a medicinal plant. We have sweet potato. This one came from the Philippines, so I call it the Philippine sweet potato, and it's a terrific ground cover to use like under eggplant and capsicums. So that's something that we'll keep in mind, and this works really well in the tropics. Becomes a very vigorous ground cover for capsicum, chilies, eggplant, etc. Let's come in here further. Now you can't really see it in this situation, but we have the sweet potato, we have the cowpea, and then we have capsicum, we have a sweet chili, growing amongst it, competing quite well. And we have a papaya that is still a few weeks away from harvest, but has terrific fruit. And this is a tropical papaya from, this one's from Christmas Island actually. This seed is from Christmas Island. The one behind it is from Thailand, and we have some Hawaiian ones in here, etc. So we have a variety of different papayas and different fruit trees. This is an acerola cherry. About a year ago, this was in a 4-inch pot and was about a foot tall. Now it's flowering, so it means that it will set fruit, and now it's over 2 meters tall. So you can see that these plants do compete with the cover crop, even though these were totally covered a couple of months ago before I did the last chop and drop, and we'll do another chop and drop in the next couple of days. This is a lychee. This was taken from a cutting, and it'll burst in vigor. It'll grow rampantly in the springtime once the soil grows up again. And we'll reduce the amount of cowpea now this season because these plants are established. They've got a root system now. They don't need so much protection. So here's another pomegranate. Here's another acerola. There's a lot of passion fruit amongst this cowpea, which we'll expose. We got 6 or 8 vines here of passion fruit, all different varieties, and we've harvested at least 300 passion fruit off of this year, and this is their first year, so they were only 8 months old, and we harvested. Got a very good crop of very large passion fruit, and we'll show you some of those photos. This is a tamarillo. You can see that it's got fruit on it. It's starting to set fruit, and once again, this was in a 6-inch pot and was only a foot tall a few months ago, and it's competed very well with the cowpea. There's another passion fruit vine which we'll have to expose. Here we have a Brazilian cherry. They're not as rampant as the acerolas. Here we have a custard apple. This custard apple was in the typical 6-liter bag and was about knee-high about a year ago. And now it's almost 2 meters high. We have another fig in here. It's also setting fruit, so we've had a very warm May, so the fruit trees think it's springtime, and that's fine with me. This is a Hawaiian papaya, a small Hawaiian papaya, so we'll see how that does. It's not nearly as vigorous as some of the other varieties, so we'll see what kind of fruit it sets. In here, it's so covered you can hardly see it, but here's a very competitive avocado that's completely taken over, so we'll show you what that looks like once we cut the vines away, once we cut the cowpea away. And come on through here. We have another custard apple. We have some turmeric. We have more comfrey. We have a carambola. We have another papaya. We have a fig that was from a cutting, so it's just starting to get bigger now. We have another lychee. We have 2 lychees together of different varieties. If you come through here, we'll show you this section, which is the second section. Here's another acerola. And here's another avocado. So we have a dozen avocados in this system. We have 20 acerolas and a dozen Brazilian cherries and a dozen lychees and a dozen custard apples and half a dozen carambolas and a variety of other plants. Now, if we look at this system, this is essentially 2 rows of fruit trees, quite close together and very densely planted. But this row of fruit trees gets all the morning sun and some of the afternoon. This row of fruit trees gets some of the morning sun and a lot of the afternoon. So because we have 2 rows of fruit trees, we have really good sun penetration because this is not an orchard, this is a food forest, and it's part of an intercropping system. So there'll be a 12-meter space here for annual crops like lettuces and capsicum and eggplant, etc. And then another section of food forest. And that's a form of agroforestry or intercropping or permaculture food forest. So we are blending our food forest perennials with our annual crops. And amongst this food forest, of course, even though it's heavily populated with cowpea at the moment, once we cut this cowpea out, we'll start planting vegetables in here. We've already had a cycle of vegetables in here. We've harvested eggplant and cucumber and capsicum and pumpkin and rock melons and watermelons out of the system already before the rampant growth came in. So we use every bit of space for production, and that means you get early harvest while you're waiting for your perennial plants, which even in the equatorial climates could take 3 or 4 years to produce with any significance. So this is how we're doing it. This is fast forward agriculture based in using soil microbiology as the primary workforce that is established by high value compost, and the compost is made biologically. It's digested by microorganisms. And the point of difference between common compost and bio-vital compost, which is Trust Nature's system, is that we use the compost as a medium for growing beneficial plant and soil microorganisms. So now we'll go over to this section of food forest, and we'll show you what's hidden in those that jungle. So just follow me and see if you can make it through the jungle. Now, even though this has taken a bit of energy to establish, to plant out in the first place, there's been very little energy in maintaining it, which I think for a hidden garden farm is an essential element of the demonstration model, because there's a lot of land to regenerate. Labor is very expensive, so we want to marry food production and tree establishment, perennial tree establishment, as we're developing soil fertility. So they come up together. So as the soil fertility gets better, the trees grow more, we're creating the biomass of the cover crops, and it's all coming up in unison with very low maintenance in between establishment times and preparation for harvest. As we get better fertility after the first year, we can plant more annual vegetables in this, and in this system I would look at cucumbers, melons, capsicums, eggplant, etc. And because we're in the semi-tropics, we can very successfully grow asparagus. We have several asparagus plants hidden amongst this. There's one, and we'll trial that at Hidden Garden and see how we do with growing asparagus in that humid tropics. But as I walk through here, you can see that we have a lychee, we have some acerolas, we have a carambola, we have some asparagus, we have a chocolate pudding fruit, we have another chocolate pudding fruit here, we have a fig here, we have an acerola here, we have a chocolate pudding fruit here, we have a custard apple here, we have another papaya here, we have an avocado, we have some Brazilian cherries, we have another lychee, we have another avocado, we have some pigeon pea, we have a fig, we have a carambola, we have a custard apple. We even have some grapes in here that we'll expose out once we do the chop and drop over the next couple of days. So that just gives you a peek in the window. Once again, this is only 10 meters wide. This entire system is only 10 meters wide and designed to have intercropping in between. One of the things about these rampant gardens with the fruit trees that can include more variety, of course, especially in the equatorial climate of Christmas Island, is that we have this as a habitat for insects, for beneficial insects, predatory insects. We have this as a system that helps monitor heat. It gives a bit of shade. It also transpires heavily, so we have a bit more of constant moisture. We're also building fertility, and we have a habitat for microorganisms that can migrate into our open row systems. And I think that's a very important element of this permaculture style food forest as part of an intercropping system, that we have a habitat for the microorganisms and the predatory insects that can help protect the intercropping, the annual crops in between these 8-meter, 10-meter wide systems. So let's continue with this, and we'll show you what it looks like after we chop and drop. Thank you.